the final right now for Apple is Apple revenue growth is at 81.98%, which is very, very high, which the stock value is doing very well. And so what's next for Apple? So there's been a lot of talk about, I know that Fred brought up the fact that where Apple will be in the future and where Apple might be without Steve Jobs. And so this is some of the things where if Steve Jobs is around and looking into the future of Apple, where we want to be as a company, we have $75 billion in cash. And there's a lot of things we can do with it. And some of the big things that we're looking into is strategic acquisitions and also technology patents, which are some of the big ways that we can make a difference as a company. And when you're looking at Apple, Barnes & Noble is one of the things that has crossed their mind, and also Netflix. So these are companies that analysts say that they probably might acquire, and they've already got some patent agreements with Microsoft. But in the future, you might see them acquire more technological patents, which will be important because of the amount of money they have. But I think they might end up buying an island or something. You never know, maybe Fiji or one of the Cook Islands. So you never know with Steve Jobs. Well, they are investing in this, which is the new Apple headquarters. It kind of looks like the new frontier of Apple. And they're spending a lot of money into this, but I think the main point when looking into something like this and where they want to be in about 4 or 5 years, it's going to be completed in 2015. They want to show that they are an American company, and they want to show that they're helping this economy. They want to show that they are a California-based company. This is going to be housed in Cupertino, where Apple was founded. And this is a big statement saying that Apple is a massive company, not just an American company, but a global company. They're willing to put and invest money into this country, and most particularly this state. And so this is something that I think signifies Apple, that they are an American brand and that they're willing to stay over here. And just ending up quickly, the future, should you invest in Apple? I know that Professor Sarsfield, this is a question that you've been asking everybody, every group. Should you invest in Apple? There has been fights about maybe what would the world with Apple, like without Steve Jobs in it, what would it bring? I think with the people involved right now with around Steve Jobs, Apple will do fine without Steve Jobs. If Steve Jobs leaves tomorrow, yeah, there might be some trouble, the stock might go down, but eventually it will stabilize because there's a lot of people who know Apple, who know the company in and out, and some of their main managers and their main executives are there, and they know Steve Jobs very well, and they know how he works, and they've been there close to him, and they know the future, and they know exactly what will happen with Apple. And so, as I guess, if we are asking you guys to invest, we would say to go ahead and invest in the company because the future of Apple does look bright. And before we end, we just wanted to end with this quote, and I'll let Fred, our team leader, finish with that statement.
So this is something that I found while doing research for this project. It's from Bill Gates, who was Microsoft's chairman back in 1998. He said, what I can't figure out is why Steve Jobs is even trying to be CEO of Apple. He knows he can't win. And I mean, looking at it now, it's a very remarkable quote that, 13 years later, you look at where Microsoft is, you look at where Apple is, and you can't even compare the two companies. Thank you, guys.
I had a couple.
Yes.
There was a slide you had that showed the anticipated value of 327.
Oh, go back. I don't think it was the anticipated value, it was the last trading.
Right there. Go back to that where it says hold. So the recommendation is to hold, and the target price is 327, which would require a 16% downturn.
Mm-hmm.
Could you briefly discuss that?
Yeah.
And if that is your thought process, what do you do? Because that's inconsistent with the other things you said.
The only reason we.
I'm sorry, perhaps that's inconsistent with the other things you said.
Okay, let me just, I want to show you. That's where, that's what Apple is at right now, 373. That's the last trade. And we said the target price is 327 because looking at the competition and what's around it right now, that's where, at worst case scenario, that's where we could be. And we would still recommend people to buy or hold at that moment in time because looking at where the competition is around Apple and where we could be in the future, we would allow ourselves to be at that moment, at this moment in time and maybe in the future, at the worst case scenario, but we would still be willing to tell people that we are a fine company.
So that's not intrinsic value, that's kind of a floor?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, basically baseline. So that would be our worst case scenario. We don't want to be there, but saying that if things aren't going well, or right now, look at what's happening, within a week we've dropped about 15 points. So if it does drop any further, it could, I'm guessing it won't get to that point, but if it does, we're still as investors or like analysts, we're still hoping in the short term that we'll let people hold our trade and continue to buy it later on as well. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions?
So that you have a beta there of 1.2? It's right on that same chart. Said beta,
1.12.
well, yeah, then below that was 1.2. Then if you check Yahoo, I think you'll see it's about 1.2, something like that.
1.2 probably today, yesterday and today it's probably changed. Although it's gone up, it's 1.23.
Do you have to recall what's the beta for Intel? Closer to 1?
Closer to 1.
Here's a company that's probably the best managed company in the world. Maybe? Close to it. And yet it's got a high beta. It's got a beta above the average market.
I think with, as I mentioned, Apple, like it's a great company, but Apple also, with the products it releases and all that, it's a premium brand. And it caters to a higher income individuals. And because of that, like when you have problems in the economy and like what's happening right now, they could be people neglect to buy those type of products because they're valued at higher prices. And I was talking about the Nokia phones, for example, was a point where Nokia can sell phones which cost like $5 or $10, whereas Apple, you never see them sell a phone for $5, $10. And that's because that's not their business. They sell premium products and they sell amazing products, and so they're not going to sell products to you for $5, $10. And that's why their beta is more risky, because when you have problems in the economy and all that, when people get fired, get laid off and all that, they're not gonna be running into the stores buying Apple's products, because we cater to higher end individuals. And that might change in the future, or it might not, because Apple has built its company through that process. And so that's why they do have a riskier beta. Yeah, I hope this one's not for me.
I'd like to go to the slide where you're talking about bonds and noble.
You got to.
I can find it. What's up? There we go. No. That's it. There we go.
Well, I wanted to ask you about, like, you stated that Apple caters to a group of people there is a higher margin for the product. Right? Now, with Barnes & Noble and Netflix I can understand, but Barnes & Noble, how does that relate to the strategy for Apple's long term? And how does it really, there is a convergence in the strategy? Because if Apple was to look away for a minute from its core values, then how would it impact the strategy? That's my question.
Well, I mean, again, there's a lot of speculation on what Apple will do with the money. They probably won't buy anything, in my opinion, but they could. And that's kind of what analysts have been saying. Apple, again, with the iPad right here, you can go into the bookstore, 1 second, to iBooks, and you can really purchase any kind of book that you want. And again, Barnes & Noble is a huge book. Like right here, I have our textbook on my iPad, so I don't need to carry a book. Should load up, there it is. So, I mean, it's really going to change. Here it is. Here's our textbook right on the iPad. And so it really has changed the way people are going to do it. So, I mean, that's kind of, Barnes & Noble has it up. And so they could implement that into their books because Barnes & Noble is a book company, and then, that can help expand and again compete with Amazon with Kindle.
So I think that's a lot of where Barnes & Noble has come from, is the idea of iTunes and music, downloading music, and if they do invest in Barnes & Noble, it's the idea of investing books into making them into ebooks and developing that idea. And so that's a possibility.
So maybe the digital media, right?
Possibly, yes.
You could get an Apple. I'm serious, you throw in.
Throw in Apple. You want red or green?
It doesn't look like there's any more questions. There are. I thought your presentation was just extraordinary. I really do. I'm quite impressed. I really am. Nicely done, guys. Really good.
Also, for future references, we do plan on putting our presentation on YouTube, so anyone else can.
I was joking about that.
You're still recording.
We are.
Let's delete that thing about me being a Republican. Y'all bounce me off this